Burkina Faso is facing a coordinated wave of terror, with attacks reportedly striking at the core of its military infrastructure. 4 military bases in 4 towns in the span of just 4 days, with at least 10 people dead.
Burkina Faso is under fire, and this time, the gunshots are not isolated. They are coordinated, calculated, timed. In just 4 days, 4 military bases across the country were struck. East, north, east again, then north once more. The pattern is impossible to ignore. The message is even harder to miss. It began in Balanga. On Thursday, armed fighters stormed a military detachment in the eastern region. Security sources say at least 10 soldiers and civilian volunteers were killed. But what makes this attack different is not just the death toll. It's what happened after. The attackers reportedly stayed. They held their ground. Until the next day. That's not a hit and run. That is a statement. Then came Saturday. The northern town of Titao was hit. An army base targeted. Parts of the installation reportedly destroyed. Almost simultaneously, another military position in Tanjari, also in the east, came under attack. Officers were killed, infrastructure damaged, and before the country could process that, Sunday brought yet another assault, this time on a military detachment in Nara in the north. 4 towns, 4 strikes, 4 days. This is not random violence. It feels organized. And here's what makes it more alarming. Hundreds of fighters are believed to have been involved across these operations. That suggests coordination, logistics, planning, not scattered insurgents acting alone. Officially, only the Balanga deaths have been confirmed. The government in Ouagadougou has not released a full report detailing the scope of the attacks. Casualty figures beyond the initial confirmation remain unclear. Social media posts claim the numbers are much higher, but those claims remain unverified. Still, the geography tells its own story. Northern Burkina Faso borders Mali. The eastern frontier touches Niger. Both borders have long been described as active corridors for armed groups linked to ISIS and Al-Qaeda's regional affiliate, JNIM. For years, these porous boundaries have allowed fighters to move across territories with relative ease. What we may be witnessing now is not just a domestic flare-up, but a cross-border surge, and the violence is no longer contained within Burkina Faso's citizens. Authorities in Ghana say a truck carrying Ghanaian tomato traders may have been caught in one of the attacks. The Ghanaian embassy is now working with Burkina Faso authorities to confirm details and identify those affected. That changes the equation. When traders are caught in crossfire, when neighboring governments become involved, this is no longer just a national security issue. It becomes regional instability. Meanwhile, in the capital, Ouagadougou, silence. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who seized power in 2022, promising to restore security, has not publicly addressed the wave of attacks. Since taking control through a coup, the military government has increasingly reduced public communication about terrorist incidents. Information flows slower. Confirmations take longer. Details remain scarce. But the violence does not slow. Burkina Faso has been battling armed insurgency for more than a decade. Since 2015, tens of thousands of civilians and soldiers have reportedly been killed, and more than half of those deaths occurred in just the last 3 years. 3 years. That timeline overlaps directly with the period of military rule. Now Burkina Faso ranks at the top of the Global Terrorism Index, becoming the first country outside Afghanistan and Iraq to hold that position for 2 consecutive years. The Sahel has become the epicenter of global terrorism deaths, and Burkina Faso sits at its heart. The question now is simple, but heavy. Are these attacks isolated blows, or are they the opening chapter of something larger? Because this is no longer just about bullets and bases. It is about promises. When Captain Ibrahim Traoré took power in 2022, he did so with one message above all. Others, security would return. The military would restore order. The bleeding would stop. For many Burkina Faso citizens, that promise mattered. Years of escalating attacks had eroded trust in civilian leadership. Entire communities had been displaced. Villages emptied. Schools shut down. Markets abandoned. The coup was not just political. It was emotional. It was fueled by frustration and fear. But now, 4 coordinated attacks in 4 days are raising uncomfortable questions. If multiple military installations can be hit almost simultaneously, what does that say about control? If attackers can remain at a base overnight after killing soldiers, what does that signal about deterrence? And if hundreds of fighters can mobilize across 2 major frontiers without immediate containment, what does that reveal about intelligence on the ground? This is not a minor breach. It is a stress test. For years, armed groups linked to ISIS and Jama'at Nasr al-Islam wal-Muslimin, known as JNIM, have expanded their footprint across the Sahel. They do not operate like conventional armies. They adapt. They fragment. They blend into terrain and communities. They exploit weak borders and local grievances. And increasingly, they strike symbolic targets. Military bases are not random choices. They are psychological targets. When an army installation falls, even partially, it sends a message far beyond the physical damage. It whispers to nearby communities, the state may not be able to protect you. It tells recruits, the government is vulnerable. It tells neighboring fighters, momentum is possible. Momentum is powerful. And right now, the Sahel is experiencing a dangerous shift. Over half of global terrorism deaths are now reported in this region. Burkina Faso sits at the center of that storm. For 2 consecutive years, it has ranked as the country most affected by terrorism worldwide. That is not a statistic. That is a warning. Meanwhile, regional alliances are shifting. Burkina Faso has strengthened ties with Mali and Niger, 2 neighboring states also under military rule after coups. Together, they have signaled a desire to reshape security cooperation in the Sahel. Western military partnerships have been reduced. New defense alignments are emerging, but on the ground, the attacks continue. And silence from the capital grows louder. The absence of detailed official communication creates a vacuum. In that vacuum, rumors thrive. Social media fills the gaps. Casualty figures multiply online. Fear spreads faster than facts. Information control can buy time, but it cannot rebuild damaged installations. It cannot bring back fallen soldiers. And it cannot erase the reality that armed groups appear capable of coordinating across vast stretches of territory. So the question becomes larger than Traoré himself. Is this insurgency evolving faster than the state can respond? Are these attacks probing weaknesses, testing, response times, supply lines, troop reinforcements? Or are they laying the groundwork for a broader offensive aimed at stretching military resources thin? Because 4 attacks in 4 days is not just pressure. It is a pattern. And patterns suggest planning. For ordinary citizens in the north and east, this is not geopolitical theory. It is daily survival. It is deciding whether to travel a road, whether to send a child to school, whether to trust that a military convoy means safety, or risk. Every new strike chips away at confidence. Every unanswered question deepens uncertainty. And in conflicts like this, perception can be just as powerful as firepower. If people begin to believe the state is losing ground, that belief alone can shift loyalties, influence cooperation, and alter the battlefield without a single additional shot being fired. Burkina Faso is not just fighting militants, it is fighting doubt. Power does not collapse in one loud moment. It erodes. Slowly, quietly, then suddenly. Burkina Faso's crisis is no longer measured only in territory lost or bases attacked. It is measured in endurance. How long can a state absorb coordinated blows before cracks begin to show? How long can a government promise security while insurgents demonstrate reach? Because this wave of attacks feels different, not just because of the number, not just because of the timing, but because of the symbolism. 4 military targets in rapid succession sends a message that goes beyond tactical gain. It suggests confidence. It suggests capability. It suggests that the groups behind these operations believe they can stretch the army across multiple fronts, north and east, forcing it to react rather than dictate. And when an army is reacting, it is not controlling. Captain Ibrahim Traoré rose to power on the argument that previous leadership had failed to contain the insurgency. He positioned the military as the solution. Stronger response, sharper strategy, national revival through force and unity. But insurgencies do not disappear because of declarations. They adapt. For more than a decade, armed groups have embedded themselves into the Sahel's complex landscape, exploiting poverty, local grievances, ethnic tensions, and weak infrastructure. They move on motorbikes. They blend into rural terrain. They strike where state presence is thin. And in Burkina Faso, state presence is thin across vast areas. Entire communities have already been displaced. Millions face humanitarian strain. Schools in conflict zones have closed. Farmers abandon land. Trade routes become unpredictable. Every attack compounds an already fragile environment. And when regional trade, like Ghanaian tomato merchants, is caught in the violence, the ripple effect spreads beyond borders. Investors hesitate. Transport slows. Fear travels faster than goods. The Sahel today accounts for more than half of global terrorism deaths. That statistic alone should command global attention. Yet for many Burkina citizens, the crisis feels intensely local. It is about whether their town will be next, whether soldiers will arrive in time, whether the night will pass quietly. The government's reduced communication strategy may aim to prevent panic, but silence can also create anxiety. In modern conflict, information is a battlefield. Whoever shapes the narrative shapes perception, and perception influences morale. If confidence in security forces weakens, recruitment for armed groups becomes easier. If communities feel abandoned, cooperation declines. If fear dominates daily life, stability becomes distant. So what happens next? Is this the beginning of a sustained campaign targeting military infrastructure? Are armed groups attempting to demonstrate dominance ahead of a larger territorial push? Or is this a high-impact show of force designed to project strength without holding ground? The answers are not yet clear. But what is clear is this. Burkina Faso stands at a pivotal moment. The military government must prove that it can respond decisively, not just with force, but with coordination, intelligence, and visible stabilization. Because the longer attacks appear synchronized and unchecked, the more they challenge the very foundation of the junta's legitimacy. This is not simply about defeating militants. It is about restoring belief. Belief that bases are secure. Belief that borders are guarded. Belief that promises made in 2022 still carry weight in 2026. 4 attacks in 4 days may be remembered as isolated incidents, or they may be remembered as the signal that the conflict has entered a new phase. History often reveals turning points only after they pass. For now, Burkina Faso remains on edge, watching its northern and eastern frontiers, waiting for the next move, hoping that the silence from Ouagadougou is strategy and not uncertainty. Because in conflicts like this, momentum matters, and whoever controls momentum controls the future.